What's going on, Rob Mob, coming at you with another video. Now this one is a very important one to pay attention to. I'm going to go over a couple of different methods to solve this problem, but make sure you're paying attention along the way and maybe you'll learn something. So, determine which of the following expressions are equivalent to the expression below. We have negative 3 times 3w minus 6. And we have a couple of answer choices here. Some of them are going to work, some of them are not going to work, and we're going to find out how and why. So, when I look at a problem like this, my first instinct is to distribute. Always an easy method, always something that we should tackle first and foremost. So we are distributing a negative 3. Keep in mind that negative is still here. We are distributing a negative 3 to 3w. That is negative 3 times 3w. That is going to be a negative 9w. And then we have a negative 3 times a negative 6. Keep in mind that this negative is also here. We have 1, 2 negatives, so we know that is going to be a positive. 3 times 6 is going to be 18. So, negative 9w plus 18, we already know right off the bat that this is different than answer choice number 1. We know that this is going to be different than answer choice number 5. We know that that is not going to work because both of these, the math shows us that we are not going to get a positive 9 here and we're not going to get a positive 6 here. Great. Now what about this expression right here? We have a 6 times negative w plus 2. Let's go through and solve this equation and double check. So we have a 6 times a negative w, that is going to be negative 6w, and a 6 times a positive 2, that is going to be plus 12. And right there we can see these are not equal, so we can cross that out. What about 18 minus 9w? Now here we have a negative 9w plus 18. We could just reword that. And now we have an 18 minus 9w. Now these are both the same expression, right? We just turn the signs. You can do addition and subtraction in any order. So number 3 works. What about this number 4? There are a couple different ways that we can do it, and I'm going to solve. The easy way would just be to try and solve and then simplify this expression. So we have a 9 times a negative w, so we have negative 9w, pretty easy. 9 times a positive 2 is a 18. Great. So right there we can tell that this works. Fantastic. Now, there is one more trick that I want to talk about, and this might go over a couple of people's heads, which is why a video is the perfect place to do this. If you're confused at all, go back in the video and double check your work, but this is something that I think a skill we should all have as we are moving forward. So I'm going to rewrite my equation. I have 3w minus 6 times a negative 3. Now, what do I notice in this equation that both numbers have in common? So I have a 3 here, 3 times w, and then I have a 2 3's here. I have 3 times 2, right? And this, of course, is being subtracted, so it is going to be a negative, but we know 6 is 3 times 2. So I can pull out another 3. And when I say pull out, I mean pull it out of the parentheses. So I still have my negative 3 here. That is not going anywhere. And now I have pulled out another 3. Great. So now I have a negative 3 here, I have a 3 here, and I have a, what is left in here? I had a 3 times a w, so I know I just have a w here. And I had a 3 times a 2. This is still going to be a minus, and I have just a 2 remaining here. Great. So negative 3 times w minus 2. Now this already looks very different from our number 4, but we do know number 4 works. So how can I get this equation to equal my number 4? So let's go through here, and let's simplify this a little bit more. We have a 3 times a negative 3, that is going to get me a negative 9, and w minus 2 right here. Great. Now, there is still something else we can do to this equation right here. And this is, again, going to be a little complicated, but I want to make sure that we are paying attention that this is always an option. So, inside of this equation, I have a w minus 2. As we all know, if we had an x, that x is assumed to have a 1 in front of it to indicate that it is 1x. But we do not write 1x, we just write x. We have the coefficient. We all know what a coefficient is. Our coefficient in this case is 1, which is perfectly fine. What about a negative x? And now keep in mind that this is separate from our problem. So we have a negative x here. A negative x is equal to a negative 1 as our coefficient times x. Now this is a very important indication to make. Negative x is an x that has been multiplied by negative 1. We've been calling this doing an opposite, taking the opposite of x being negative x. Great. How does that help us solve this problem? So I took out a x here, which is perfectly fine. What if I took out a negative 1 from w minus 2? Right? Now, if I'm taking out a negative 1, I am going to be dividing by negative 1 here and dividing by negative 1 here. So I still have my 9 here. My negative 9 is on the outside. Nothing is happening to that. Now I am taking out a negative 1, similar to how I took out a 3 here to leave what was left in my equation. So now I'm dividing by 3 here. Now I'm going to be dividing by negative 1 here. So if I have a w divided by negative 1, I am left with a negative w, right? A positive divided by a negative is going to get me a negative. So now I have a negative 2 divided by negative 1. A negative divided by a negative is going to be a positive 2. So now this inside the parentheses here matches this here. We have one more step to do. I'm sorry, it matches this number 4 here. We have one more step. And now that is as this negative 9 times negative 1, that is going to get us just a positive 9. The parentheses stay the same. We have a negative w plus 2. And that is how we get from our original equation to number 4. So D is our answer.